Welcome to LifeWorks Today. This podcast is provided so that together we can create a world in which all people love their lives. Our current human systems aren't working. The way of superior versus inferior, or management versus employee, or adult versus child. We need a powerful, positive, and sustainable transformation. This podcast is for you who seek to be happy, fulfilled, and peaceful so that your abundant life works today.
So welcome everyone to LifeWorks Today. This podcast series is designed to bring you hope and new ideas to apply in your personal and professional life. This show is about human systems, which are simply how we think, speak, feel, and act, and how this is directly tied to a specific cultural structure and system that expands human potential. The system I'm talking about is a responsibility-based culture. And some of you who may not have heard my former podcasts may be wondering, what's a responsibility-based culture? So I just want to go over that for a second and remind you that a responsibility-based culture is one where you have buy-in from everyone at every level. Only then do your people show up strong. Only then does everyone work together collaboratively and embracing a common mission. So the environment is supportive and inclusive, and work gets done quickly and efficiently. Your organization then thrives, and you see rewards everywhere. And the reason that's so is that the number one competitive advantage for the organizations of tomorrow is when an organization invests in a human system that creates a new kind of team where people are motivated from within. And those organizations that are doing that have developed a responsibility-based culture. So what you learn in each of our podcast episodes will be an offer to you of insights and tools that are applicable in your life, whether it's at home or at work or in the larger community. And that's because we consider today's challenges and trends, and we really connect the dots between what's required of us as individuals and as communities when we consider today's trends and those of the future. So these would include things like globalization, diversity and inclusion, digital transformation, artificial intelligence, gig economy, complexity, and the trend we're going to be focusing on today, which is Agile. So this podcast episode is focused as a response to a market segment that we find has a high need for the culture transformation model that we provide. It's the Agile and DevOps market. Whether that market is happening within an entire enterprise or it's being leveraged within various digital transformation and software engineering projects. So this podcast is about why so many Agile transformations fail. Whether this is being adopted across an entire enterprise or company, or whether it's being leveraged within various digital transformation and software engineering projects. I want to say up front that while I'll give you a little bit more information on Agile, I'll be asking questions of an expert in this field. And the first question is going to be his version of what Agile and DevOps are and why they matter. So like LifeWorks systems, the Agile shift and the transformation process is relevant today and requires that people understand the Agile models and what makes them work and how to succeed in them, as well as what makes them fail. So here's just a little overview that I'm bringing to this. Agile is a mindset, and it's a set of organizing and productivity practices that's really growing in popularity. And those who realize the power of Agile, what's at stake in choosing to adopt it, and what's needed to create success, are those people in the trenches who participate as Agile strategists, coaches, consultants, and trainers. They recognize that if an organization has a dysfunctional workplace culture, it won't be able to leverage the benefits of an Agile transformation, and then they lose their investments of time and money. So savvy business leaders know the value of Agile, And they're now beginning to recognize that to leverage the benefits of Agile, they must nurture certain kinds of people within a culture system. And this is more important than usual within an Agile environment because Agile initiatives are related to managing complexity and speed of change and growth that can't be otherwise managed or able to progress. So what we look for is who are the people that are adopting this Agile approach, this Agile mindset. So as CEO of Lifeworks Systems, a performance management and culture transformation company, we're drawn to the Agile market because the people who embrace Agile frequently exhibit a number of what we call psychographics, and that make Agile thinkers and adapters compatible with the responsibility-based culture model that we provide. So some of these qualities are things like Agile people tend to have awareness, whether they're inside of a company or bringing the Agile skills to the company. They know what the future holds. They're looking at the important factors that they need to keep top of mind. Those things that I just mentioned, the speed of change, the level of complexity in the workplace, and the level of change happening in technology, and the need to be able to quickly pivot to meet the existing and future needs of a rapidly changing marketplace. They tend to be the people that value research, thought leadership, and innovation, and pay attention to what's happening in business development and the improvements that they may need to make for their business to meet their growth goals and be prepared for what's coming in the future. So they have awareness. That's number one. The second thing they have is they recognize their own need. They're paying attention to profit and loss on their business practices. They could be bleeding out through high turnover of their employees or experiencing low staff engagement or low productivity, or they're noticing that they're not staying competitive. And so because they're paying attention to that need, they're really ready to address those, and they're paying attention to what it costs them and what they gain if they course correct. So the third quality that Agile thinkers and practitioners have is they have passion and conviction about preserving the viability and the value of their organization. So these are people who feel compelled to seek excellence. They're intentional about what they know and need and are highly motivated to find solutions and commit to those solutions in order to keep the organization moving forward. So we know companies that we've encountered that they have very recognizable needs that are, defined in even terms of financial losses, but they're apathetic about what they're going to do about it. So really, a lot of the Agile people, they're really passionate about preserving the viability of their company. The fourth quality they have is that there are people that are, to a large degree, trend forward and innovative thinkers and leaders. So when we meet with organizations that are more apathetic, a lot of times it's that they're afraid of trying anything new or different, and they become very risk averse to considering needed change, even if the organization is leaking profitability like the Titanic. So this psychographic is about having innovative trend-forward leaders at the helm who also believe in sharing power with their employees and helping them become developed into leaders within the organization. They're the ones that are going to take reasonable risks because they know already that if they don't stay on top of this innovative future, they're going to be left behind. And then the fifth quality that we really see in the Agile mindset are people that are willing to invest their time and money into the transformation process of their culture. And part of it's that they've already invested in the Agile skills, training, and transformation process in parts of their company, and they recognize we're going to lose that investment if we don't make sure that all of the conditions are in place to make sure that the investments we're making are going to really pay off. And so that's what I'm excited about introducing you to our guest today, because he embodies all of these qualities. He is a person that recognizes what's going on in the world and has strong awareness. He's passionate about what he's doing and what he's learning and how he's moving forward and growing. He's an innovator. He's a thought leader. and he's in the trenches. And so he has been willing to invest time into his own growth, into his own experience, but also even into learning about what kind of culture is needed so that there are less Agile transformations failing. So as you all know that have been listening to this podcast for a while, I generally open with a quote and somewhere in the early part of the podcast and also end with a quote. So today's quote actually came from another expert Agile consultant. And I just love this quote because it's really a clear view into what some of the Agile consultants are facing on the front lines. And he says this: I submit that there must be a commitment to, a practice of, and the execution of professional common behaviors and the presence of highly communicated, standardized organizational expectations, without which there are no supports upon which the Agile bar can be confidently raised. That's a big quote. That's a big sentence there. And yet it's so important for us to realize that today's change pace and the importance of managing consistency requires that there are a set of guidelines that are so clear and a set of concepts and tools that are so clear in order for this Agile bar to be confidently raised. So I just wanted to share that with you from a real live second consultant. So now I'm going to introduce you to our guest for today, who is an expert who lives and breathes and leads and researches in this field. So my guest today is Don White, an Agile and DevOps strategist, consultant, trainer, and coach for the past 6 years. And that work was born out of his software quality assurance background that he was involved in the previous 15 years. Don's experience spans banking, insurance, investment management, global retail, virtual reality education, healthcare, digital marketing, and domain name registrar spaces. So he knows firsthand the power of Agile DevOps transformations, as he's been key to helping organizations adopt an Agile mindset and systems. He also has deep insights into why too many Agile transformations fail, which is how Don and I came to choose this topic for today's podcast: why Agile transformations fail. In our conversation, Don and I agreed that the following 4 questions are likely to be the most important for those of you listening today. But before I get into those questions, I just want to let you know a little bit more about Don on a personal level. He's been married for 23 years. He has a son who's a junior in college. And along with his love of his family, environmental sustainability, and a triple bottom line mindset is a shared passion of Don and his son. So I just really appreciate him, not only for his technical, his business acumen, his many years of experience, but for who he is as a person. And it's been so great for me to know his value system and know him both professionally and even on that personal level of shared values. So the 4 questions that Don and I have prepared for you are this. So I'm going to name them now, and then I'm going to ask Don to go over each of them with you. So first, before I do that, Don, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Judy. I am so excited about this opportunity, and I share the same sentiments, getting to know you and the Lifeworks systems, especially how I can actually apply it beyond just my career, but within my family and those types of things too.
Yes, I'm so glad we can kind of have that common. It's a holistic approach, and you're seeing that too. So I'm really grateful for that. So Don, the first question we wanted to be able to explain to the audience is, what is Agile? Because not everybody knows what Agile is, and they don't know what DevOps is. And what are the value of these mindsets and practices to all businesses? So that's one. I'm going to just name all these questions first, and we'll come back to them. So the second question is, why do so many Agile transformations fail? The third question is, what are the traits and the strengths that are crucial to develop in individuals and teams that are using Agile? And then the fourth question is, what must leaders, and by leaders we mean executives, managers, supervisors, anyone in a leadership position, What must they understand and align with to create a successful Agile transformation context? So let's go ahead and start at the beginning, Don. What is Agile and DevOps, and what are their value to all businesses?
Well, you did a really good job giving some background on it, but I'm going to add quite a bit from that perspective. For starters, Agile arrived on the scene in the 1990s, and it was emerged from the development community having a massive frustration with waterfall outcomes. And what I mean by that is in the software development industry, those folks take a ton of pride in all the things that they're developing. It's like their art, it's their babies. And here's the thing is, in a waterfall development scenario, you have massive requirements, and to develop a massive development effort that may take a quarter, even up to a year to develop. And so these developers would spend all this time developing this massive thing. Well, those requirements, when you have a massive thing of requirements, there's a lot of assumptions that can be made, and they're all mostly unvalidated assumptions. And sometimes those assumptions impact other assumptions. And if you have something wrong, you can have a real cascading mess. And the other thing to keep in mind is there's a big lag time from when the thing actually gets developed to when the actual end users and customers actually see it and can provide any kind of feedback on it. And what the frustration was is these developers would be spending all this time developing these things. By the time it got into the hands of their customers and their end users, their business needs and things evolved, and the requirements needed to change. It turns out what they actually delivered isn't what they wanted or needed. And so the larger the effort, the more risk, rework, and waste go up because there was no feedback in that big lag time. And so these thought leaders in the development space came up with this thing called that Agile Manifesto. And I'm going to read it to you real quick. This is the manifesto for Agile software development, and you can go to agilemanifesto.org. And these thought leaders came up with a real simplistic way to look at these things. We are, and this is in quotes, we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. Through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions over process and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan. And then underneath it says, while there is value on the items on the right, we value the items on the left more.
I'll let our listeners know that we'll post that in the details of this podcast so that if somebody wants to go back and say, now, what was that website? We've got it captured within our podcast notes for everybody.
Oh, awesome. Very good. Thanks.
The other thing is I can't help but notice that the very problems that occurred in the waterfall model for developing software are the same problems that happen with people. A lot of assumptions, a lot of time before anybody deals with anything, and then you have a disaster. So it's kind of amazing. So you're basically saying Agile started because of the needs of what was happening in software engineering.
Exactly, because the outcomes, they were not getting the outcomes that they were hoping. These and here's the thing is I have not experienced teams of developers that don't take a ton of pride in what they're doing. And when they put time, energy, and effort into these babies, and it's not valued or needed, and they assumed wrong, that's a huge frustration for them.
Yeah,
right?
They don't feel like they can contribute.
Yeah, and then people are looking down at them, and they get blamed, and it just creates all kinds of bad stuff. Right?
Yeah. So Don, I know you're talking about the origin of Agile. How did it develop into something that's applied enterprise-wide? Because that's like a whole different animal.
Yeah, and well, so then eventually what happens, and that was the start of Agile, is a change of a mind, is basically a paradigm shift, right? From a business functional experience, the huge value is that you greatly reduce the risk, rework, and waste when you're developing solutions for your market and your customers.
So tell me how would that be? Give me an example of how that would look outside of software engineering. How is Enterprise Agile applied in a non-technology way? Because people need to realize this isn't only about software engineering.
I'm glad that you pointed that out, Judy. You're absolutely right. These Agile frameworks can be applied to anything like learning and development, developing curriculum and things of that nature. It's also used for scientific discovery and those types of things.
So Don, in terms of departments that are consistent across organizations like sales and HR, and are those able to be implemented in an agile manner, and what is the value if they are? What I'm asking is, how does a regular everyday company that, yes, has technology, because every business is a technology business, but how does any normal company also recognize how an enterprise agile approach prepares them to be ready to pivot quickly to the market? Because that's what I understand that you've told me Enterprise Agile does. It's so much bigger than software development. It's a way of even organizing the company to be able to shift, just like this pandemic, where you have to shift the way that you're doing meetings, the way that you're doing your HR, the way you're doing your billing. There's probably a whole lot of things that can use Agile principles and practices that are beyond even software engineering.
You're absolutely right. It's because you're getting that continuous feedback. You're inspecting and adapting how you're developing things, and you're continuously learning. That's called organizational learning. And the more you take that organizational learning and you can apply it to the next time you deliver, well, each time you deliver that, the chances of risk and rework or waste keeps going down over time, whereas the old way, you wait so long to be able to get anything in the hands of your end users and customers. It's a linear relationship. The longer you wait to get any kind of feedback and any kind of organizational learning that you can apply to whatever you're developing, those are the outcomes that you're going to experience. What you're trying to deliver to the marketplace, is it going to meet what the customer wants and needs? And furthermore, because you're delivering it incrementally, as things change, you can factor that into how you're developing, and you can pivot. You can switch what you're developing on, whereas the old way, you have to develop this massive thing, and there's no way to make a change to it. It's almost impossible.
There's no course correcting along the way.
It's hard you can't course correct. This Agile gives you that ability to completely course correct. That's just one of many of the things, but then it's that organizational learning where the teams are learning, the business stakeholders are learning, and not just learning from their interactions with each other, but also from the marketplace and how things are evolving externally. That external learning can be applied in that journey.
So I remember you telling me, Don, that the ultimate result is that the people at all different levels and in all different roles are able to co-create new efficiencies, new successes, deeper collaboration, new innovations, and engage people more fully. Would you say that is still how you categorize the outcomes to a business? Yes,
that's the ultimate goal. But I want to back up a step here on how Agile has evolved to being looked at from a cultural perspective, because Agile originally was focused so much on the development community, and that's why they were able to make some strides within that community. But over time, if the culture isn't supportive of what the teams and development community is trying to do, their efforts would get crushed by the culture. So what happened is, Agile evolved. So now we're going to fast forward to 2015, and that's where DevOps starts coming into play, where Agile moved beyond like the development community to where they looked at, you already said this, Judy, that every business, whether they want to admit it or not, is a technology business. And accepting that reality, people started asking these types of questions because they look at the big technologists like the Googles, the Amazons, and those folks. Well, they're deploying software into the production environment multiple times per day. So now the organizations who went from waterfall to Agile and are delivering somewhat incrementally, maybe every 2 weeks, maybe every week. Well, now they're asking for, in DevOps, what they're asking is, we want to deliver software to and keep in mind, DevOps is specifically for technology. I want to make that clear. Whereas Agile is more than, you can apply it to other things besides technology. DevOps is really specifically about technology and software development. And DevOps is asking that question, is what does it take for us to deliver software to the production environment once per day per developer? Now that's really incremental delivery. DevOps created all these engineering practices and mindsets to automate all of that, to make it so that they could do things real fast, but not only automate, have all this monitoring built in as well, so they always knew where they're at.
Let me see if I can sum up the answer to this question. Agile is a set of organizing principles, mindset, and way of operating so that you have incremental co-creation that benefits the organization in ways that they can grow, change, and pivot quickly. So that's the bigger answer to what's the value of Agile. It's more than software development. It's the whole enterprise could be designed with those principles in mind and those ways of co-creating. And we would even say, Don, I'm pretty sure you would agree with this, Lifeworks Systems responsibility-based model is very much an Agile model. It just happens to be focused more exclusively on the human systems, the people systems. And DevOps, you're saying that DevOps is a way to even strengthen those principles in an even shorter timeline to make sure that the technology components are even more efficient, more successful, more aligned, and more quickly communicated. Is that how am I understanding that all correctly?
You're doing a really awesome job of making it real concise, Judy. I really appreciate that. And one of the things I wanted to point out, though, about the evolution to DevOps is because it broadened the interactions from the developers with the operations teams. Now they're starting to look at it from a cultural perspective. This is a cultural thing. This is an organizational thing.
That's exactly why I brought up the psychographics of people that are directly involved in Agile, like yourself, because you and I, when we talked, it was like shorthand. Because you're already in the trenches recognizing that if we don't get this culture part right, we're going to be in trouble, and that it's going to be an impossible thing to maintain and sustain. And so we have come together because there's a mutual recognition that this is so much bigger than software engineering.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So why do so many of these transformation, which are becoming very popular, Agile transformations and the DevOps, they're becoming way, way more popular all the time. But why do so many of them disappoint and fail?
Well, the culture piece is huge. Consultants and coaches can come in and they can have make some major progress on the folks that they're interacting with. But the surrounding culture, the other parts of the organization that impact can just over time crush them, and they end up reverting back to their old ways because that culture isn't supportive of those new ways of working to be really high level from that perspective. Does that answer your question, Judy?
It does, and it's really interesting because I remember when you and I talked about this question that your reasons for focusing on the culture are the same as ours, but the difference is that when you're in an agile transformation, there's a deeper commitment to managing complexity and managing change. And therefore, it's even more urgent that the awareness about culture is discovered quickly and responded to quickly. And so what I'm hearing you say is, if we don't have that culture right, especially in agile transformations, it bogs everything down really quickly. Is that?
Yeah. And to kind of give you more examples is, in many types of transformations, you'll have like the CTO is on board and really wants everyone to go agile, right? Everybody in the CTO org. Now that particular leader has impact within that domain. Anybody under his area, that doesn't include the business stakeholders who people in his area are developing stuff for. So and sometimes there's competition between those C-suite folks. And to get that culture right, to have success, everyone has to be on the same page, because the people in a technology org interact with the folks in the business side of things and the marketing folks and those folks. And that's why that culture needs to be in place, so that it's expected to be engaged with these folks that are doing lean, agile, and DevOps types transformations, and they would see the value of their engagement, how the outcomes that would be better because of their engagement, rather than seeing these things that they don't want or need because they're not engaged. By being engaged, they are contributing, and their mindset shifts from those solutions are things that the development teams deliver to us, to, these are our solutions because we are continuously informing their evolution.
What I hear you saying with that is, if we don't have highly communicated, standardized organizational expectations, that's from Jim Rose's quote, if we don't have them at all levels of the organization, what happens is that there's inadvertent sabotage. Maybe people aren't intending it, but the very fact that they're speaking different languages, focusing on different mindsets, believing in different kinds of practices becomes its own set of challenges. Is that Absolutely. What I'm understanding?
Bottom line is not on the same page. You're not on the same page. You got the CTO org on this Agile page where everybody else is on the business as usual page, and it's hard to have that be successful. And the other thing is sometimes you have the C-suite leaders on board, and then you have like leaders of team members on board, but then all the middle management in between are completely left out of the journey. And so then that's another potential reason where you'll run into some difficulties.
Yeah, it's just not having everybody, even in our culture transformation process, step number one is make sure the CEO and the senior team all get and understand the transformation process. What are we transforming from into? And then they become responsible to make sure that that's filtering down through all levels of leadership. So that's really been a missing piece for a lot of people bringing in, and, like a CTO, like you said, that brings in a model. It's now becoming more understandable or more recognizable that if you have people still doing things the old way and then groups of people doing them in a new way, it's automatically causing clashes and undoing of things. But you and I also talked a little bit about how it ends up being that certain people in an organization carry the responsibility and they become larger than life heroes, but that doesn't necessarily translate into a system that is sustainable no matter who comes and goes within it. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with that? Like you told me yourself, you remember, being in projects where you were successful, but you didn't feel like it could hold after a while after you left. What is it about having a culture model, like, how you and I have talked about the Lifework systems culture model? How does that prevent a transformation from failing? Maybe that's a better way to explain it, because what I see happening even in companies that aren't agile, sometimes there'll be a lucky circumstance that a leader will come in and they just happen to be really effective at creating good teamwork, good relationships between people, good collaboration. And yet when they leave, nobody else knows how to do that. So it just all goes back to what it was. So when you're looking at this through the lens of Agile, you guys are sometimes the larger than life heroes, right? You come in and you're helping get everybody organized and doing things properly. Why is that not sustainable? So I just want to hear your perspective on, oh my gosh, that's when you need a blah, blah, blah. Because what I'm hearing you say is that you know how to come in and do really well with your teams, but I want them to see ultimately all Agile transformations fail because there's no clear, consistent framework that everybody's expected to be practicing and using and applying on an ongoing basis. So that if you leave or someone from the team leaves, it doesn't fall apart.
I have a good way to answer that is there is consistent frameworks. And bottom line is if the organizations follow the frameworks as they are documented and they're not real complicated, the problem is we get into these engagements and they always want to try to make it like their own and then they go against what the frameworks really want. You can go ahead and do that, but you're just going to be you're going to be less effective if you don't adopt it the way the framework says you should. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
So you're saying one of the reasons that the transformations fail is that somebody starts messing with the system you've brought in.
Exactly. And the thing is the benefit of Agile and the frameworks is the roles, responsibilities, all that stuff is applicable across any company. So that makes it so it's easy to bring somebody else in because they may have been exposed to it already and they have a good sense of what we're trying to accomplish from that perspective. But where failure comes in is when the organization tries to change those types of things and really bastardize them. They basically try to do the old way using the new terms.
So the leaders don't have the understanding that they need about the relevance of the framework. So then they end up sort of disqualifying them and changing them back. And now you've lost all the ground you've gained by bringing in the newer system and having everybody learn it. I want to take a minute to remind our listeners that LifeWorks Systems specializes in performance management through healthy culture transformation. So I invite you to go to our website to learn more about LifeWorks Systems and how to get involved with us, including how to access information related to today's episode. You can find us at lifeworksystems.com. So it's lifeworksystems.com.
The more I dig into LifeWorks Systems, like, wow, the way to make an engagement, Agile, DevOps, transformation engagement to be successful is get that culture model right. And all the things that LifeWorks Systems has available to an organization is a way to do that. And there's all kinds of tools and a way to track your progress. It's just amazing.
I appreciate those kind words. It's kind of the answer to our next question. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about this. What are the traits and the strengths that need to be developed in individuals and in teams that are not always being developed in them? And what would you say if you had to list the traits and strengths that need to be crucial? What would they be?
Well, psychological safety is hugely important, and not being afraid to fail and looking at failure as organizational learning, a learning opportunity for growth. That's a huge important thing, and that's all levels within the organization.
Yes.
Another really important thing from a leader perspective is changing their mindset from being a command and control mindset to a catalytic leader who can step back and let your people figure out how to solve problems and come up with innovations and just be available to help if they run into an impediment that is outside of their control, then they can reach out to you to help them from that perspective. And if they need skills or tools or something like that, that's where the leaders can help in that regard. The other thing is from a catalytic leader perspective is you can monitor how your teams are going.
I think I hear you talking about the role of the leaders as being this catalytic leader who has faith in their people, helps their people to start believing in their own innovations, their own solutions, their own initiatives, and is there for support rather than managing everything.
Exactly. Not worrying about how much time one person is contributing to an effort to another, because bottom line is it's going to be unequal, and you really can't compare because each team is going to be different.
Right. So you're referring to the traits of the leaders should be a certain way, but I would want to I just want to ask you if you see these things that I'm going to name as compatible. I believe that any organizational initiative, whether it's Agile or if it's, something else, the traits and strengths that are missing a lot of the time are emotional intelligence. You talked about psychological safety, but most people don't know how to get there. I remember one time a client saying to me, well, why can't we just teach everybody to be transparent? And I said, if you don't have any guidelines and you don't have any skills or tools, transparency can become a bloodbath. So there are traits and strengths that every person in the organization needs so that everybody's starting at a level playing field about what kind of conditions are we going to create to have a psychologically safe environment from both the leaders and the frontline staff, right?
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better than what you just did.
I think you recognize it because when you're taking our program, you're saying, oh my gosh, I'm becoming so much more aware of myself. I'm becoming so much more aware of how to manage things in my own life that I wasn't even looking at.
When consultants and coaches come into an organization, we assume things about the culture that may not be there, right?
Yes.
And there may be dysfunctions that we have to overcome, and there's ways that we can do that. And some of us can have more success than others, but that's not something that we typically dig into. And what Lifeworks Systems does is it provides all kinds of tools and mindsets to help the organization have that all in place before transformation even starts. Right. And so they have those mindsets and skills that enable lean, agile, and DevOps transformation to be successful and stick. There's all kinds of different things that can cause that to change, like disrupting the team completely or dissolving. All those team members go somewhere else. Well, then how does that value of all that learning that team is almost lost?
What's interesting about it is if you look at the traits and the strengths as being a foundational set of people skills, it's kind of like we wouldn't come to a job without knowing how to read. We wouldn't come to a job without knowing how to do basic math, no matter what our job is. Like there's always going to be times we're going to need to draw on our language or our reading skills or our math skills. So those are basics that everybody needs to function in a workplace. What I'm seeing in our conversations is that people that are in Agile and DevOps projects, it becomes apparent that some of those traits are things like, am I self-governing? Do I own my tasks? Are we able to help each other pick up responsibility for what belongs to, like if it's your responsibility, how can I support you in picking it up? No matter if you're a leader or just a colleague. And how do we become an environment of encouraging and creating certain experiences for one another? Those are kind of basics like reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Yeah, and I'm glad you put it in that context, because I like to use metaphors as well. Because in addition to coaching in my career, I've also coached sports. I've coached basketball, I've coached football, and I even coached Lego League, robotics teams. And the bottom line is before you can do complicated, like for example in basketball, before you can have a complicated triangle offense on a basketball team, your players need to be able to dribble. Your players need to be able to do the fundamentals and get down in the proper defensive stance, know how to do post and deny defense. Well, I look at LifeWorks systems as those fundamentals from a people perspective. You have to have those fundamentals in place before you can do the things like the DevOps and that type of thing.
Exactly. I think that's a beautiful metaphor, because when you're talking about fundamentals, Now you're looking at what system needs to be put in place. But when you're talking about, well, the leaders need to be catalytic, we forget, well, what do the followers need to be? And do they all need to be leaders too? And so when everybody has some agreed upon fundamentals, now we're playing on a level playing field because we're not reacting to or neglecting or violating the fundamentals because we all know what they are. That's why I said to that person, you can't just bring in an idea like transparency if you don't have any fundamentals in place, because then it's just kind of up in the air what's going to happen with that. And I think that's what you're seeing when you're in the front trenches with Agile and DevOps, is that if we don't have those basics covered, we can't get to that next more level of complexity, just like you used in the basketball example.
Well, and then here's the other thing in the people systems is it's really about forming mutually beneficial relationships, and what I loved about LifeWorks systems is how leaders have opportunity to be followers, and those folks who are normally followers can be leaders, and getting that mindset of everybody in the organization will be a leader at some time is hugely awesome, especially in a cross-functional team. That's exactly what you have. When you have a cross-functional team, you have all these different skills and various levels of skills, and at one time, one of the persons on the team needs to lead the effort because they have the most needed skill for that particular time. Well, then next time another team member needs to have that lead the conversation and that type of thing. And
yes, and if there's too much fear and inferiority complex going on and worry about what's the rules in this setting, it inhibits creativity and forward movement and moving quickly and all those things that Agile is designed to do.
Yeah, and what I have observed is when the culture isn't right, when the leaders is present, when teams are having a disagreement or trying to solve something, all of a sudden that collaboration just stops when that leader is present, and they start looking at that leader to solve the problem.
Yeah. So Don, can you see why I insist that every level of leadership is in the same group as every level of frontline staff?
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
Those are patriarchal separations and hierarchy that are on their way out, just like waterfall is on its way out or is going out, And so it's those understandings of how to stay inside of the new rules of we're not doing command and control. That requires that people not only dismantle the old, but know what to replace it with.
Yeah, and in addition to command and control is an expert mindset where the leader is an expert, and because this person is an expert, everything has to be done that way rather than getting other people to contribute or evolve it into something even more innovative.
Yes, it isn't so rigid if you develop a sense of curiosity and a sense of everybody can lead or follow, and nobody's opinion is more important than another person's opinion. And that requires a certain amount of skills and emotional intelligence and team agreements about many, many things. Otherwise, you don't have that psychological safety and you don't have that level of maturity. So let me just ask you the next question. You've touched on this a lot, but what are some of the things the leaders need to understand and align with to have a context done in?
Their purpose and values set the table for everything, and that enables alignment so that everybody within the organization can align their purpose and values with the broader organization. That's a huge part of being able to get everybody speaking the same language and being excited about why they're there. looking at things bigger than just the widgets that they're developing or a service that they're developing, but the whole why are we developing it and that type of thing. That's that purpose and the values.
That's definitely something that they need to understand in our view. They also need to understand what is the Agile mindset? What are the Agile practices? So that they don't inadvertently sabotage the Agile transformation process. We see it all the time in our model because people don't realize that our culture mindset and practices are not aligned with the old 4 control models. They're aligned with how do we become mentors and develop people's self-directedness and their personal task ownership. So if the leaders don't understand the mindset and the practices, they're going to inadvertently go back and sabotage what the Agile coaches and consultants are trying to bring in.
You're spot on that, and that's why just like within LifeWorks systems, and you have the ideal situations, you can come in vertically and work with the top leaders, the middle management, and everyone all the way down throughout. So everyone within that vertical slice is all on the same page. That's the same type of what works best from an Agile perspective, because many times the middle management folks are left out of the journey and they don't really understand their role and why a catalytic leadership is so vitally important.
Yes. So that's an example of what I was saying there. So if they don't know also how to create a certain type of relationship that keeps people happy, that becomes a problem. Because I know you said something to me about how sometimes leaders can start treating their people like they're just resources, which feels very transactional. Like you use the word, they treat them like game pieces. Can you talk a little bit about what you think they need to shift in order to create successful Agile transformations?
Yeah, and that's going back to that project versus product mindset and understanding the value of a team being able to learn and grow together so they truly get a great understanding of their customers and end users. And all that organizational learning is a collective organizational learning within that product team. And the longer you keep that together, the more value and the faster they can turn things around and delight and surprise their end users and their customers. I call teams like a superhuman because they all are independent, are interdependent of one another, and they accentuate each other and enables them to be high performers.
That's why when we first start with a company, or even in our very first podcast in this series, we started by saying if you don't align with a responsibility-based culture, you're automatically going to align with the control models, which are then going to activate people's inferiority complexes. So it sounds like Agile has the same set of mindsets and behaviors for the leaders that they need to understand what conditions and conversations will help people to continuously feel encouraged, supported, and promoted rather than feel inferior and worried about their success and worried that they don't have adequate skills or belonging. And so that's what I'm hearing under your description is the result is people just don't feel important. They feel like they're just resources.
Exactly. And so then they have the pressure to outperform their peers rather than to help their peers grow and evolve and collectively grow and evolve. It's about, hey, I need to be better than my colleague so that I'm not the one that they let go when they have.
Right. And so it's all coming from fear and limited thinking and insecurity and competitiveness. And so the leaders have to align with collaboration being more important than competition. They have to align with developing people over managing and controlling and dominating and judging people. Right. And so those are the things that leaders have to align with for any successful transformation.
Yeah, and looking at the outcomes of these teams and nurturing them to grow and learn and collectively over time, basically nurturing that as a team rather than nurturing the individuals on the teams per se. You're nurturing behaviors that make that team become high performers, essentially, is what it boils down to. But you're looking at the outcomes of the teams, whereas the old way is to really just look at the individuals and how they're competing and how they stack. And
how I would be taking in what you're saying is, if you don't have the understanding and the alignment with things like, we're all going to be driven by purpose and values. We're all going to be focused on what we're causing one another. We're all going to be focused on how do we see team as not just achieving a goal, but helping each other be wildly successful along the way. Those are the kinds of things leaders need to understand and alignment with. And they particularly need to in an agile transformation, because the whole goal of an agile transformation is to manage rapid change and complexity. And you can't, if you're playing by a set of rules that causes comparison and competition and feeling threatened and feeling like you have to win at the cost of someone else.
Exactly.
So I appreciate you answering these questions, because you're the one that gets in there on that front line, and you're able to help people with a certain amount of new thinking, new behaviors, but you're also kind of always working against this underlying sort of dysfunctional way of doing the people behaviors. And even if you can model good emotional intelligence and good communication skills, you're still stuck with, how do I get everybody in the organization to make those things important?
Yeah, and quite frankly, I can apply some of these things within the folks that I'm engaging with, but people outside of those folks, I don't have control over that, right? And those folks are the ones that can have an impact on the folks that I'm impacting their journey. They can crush them.
Right. So it's kind of, unless you have a system for how people are to behave with one another, it's kind of hit or miss if it goes well or not.
Exactly.
So what I hear you saying is the leaders need to understand and align with not only the Agile principles and the Agile practices, but what are good human system best practices and habits and mindset. And
exactly.
One without the other just doesn't cut it. And I would happen to say that while we are singing from the same choir book, meaning Lifework systems and Agile practitioners, the common place that we meet is that if we don't get the people part right, it's a mess.
Exactly, for sure. And what I love about the Lifework systems approach is all the tools and all the different touch points. They can take individual modules, then they do group discussions on what they've learned. There's mentoring involved, and there's assessments along the way. It gets everybody on the same page, and it reinforces the learning on a regular basis. And in fact, quite frankly, I would like to take the way the LifeWorks systems are set up and do something similar from an Agile, lean, DevOps perspective.
Yeah, you and I have kind of talked about how everybody would love to be able to have a consistent, scalable process, but not everybody knows how to build one of those.
Exactly.
And so you, as an Agile practitioner, are learning and growing and evolving just like every one of us. And you're finding that the gifts you get to bring are even waking up organizations to the importance of how they treat one another as people. That's what I heard you say, that you want people to feel important and that they're being considered.
Yeah, exactly. And bottom line is, I'm always wanting to do things in the most effective way possible, right? I'm always looking, that's like the ultimate dream, that striving for utopia, right? Is and always continually trying to learn and grow and find more effective ways to do things and interact with people to achieve our dreams and our outcomes. And LifeWorks system is the blocking and the tackling and the rebounding and dribbling. And Agile is the triangle offense, and DevOps is zone offense, or, those metaphors.
That's great. I love it when you can kind of tie it to something that people can relate to. So is there anything else you want to say before we sign off here?
I just really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation, and hopefully what we discussed is going to be helpful for other people, because that's why I do this. That's when I see lights click on in people's faces and I see happiness because of they're seeing themselves in new ways and they're figuring out ways to grow and be happier, and then have their customers and end users happy as well. That makes me just love going to work.
Yeah. So in other words, you're very aligned with Lifeworks Systems' mission, which is to create a world where people love their lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm really grateful that you came on this program. And I know that there are people listening right now that are shaking their head like, yep, been there. Yep. Get what he's talking about. Or, wow, no wonder why our project isn't working. Or no wonder why this is harder than it needs to be. So I really appreciate you shedding light for those people out there that are either thinking about Agile or are already involved with Agile projects or Agile initiatives or Agile mindset, and just needed to see a little bit more into, what it's like to be in the trenches. So thank you for that. Before I finalize here, I just want to give you our ending quote, and it's by an author named John Naisbitt, who he's kind of a futurist. And he is the author of the book on megatrends. Some of you may have read this or heard of this book. And his quote is that the most exciting breakthroughs of the 21st century will not occur because of the technology, but because of an expanding concept of what it means to be human. And I would have to say that in the conversation I've had with Don White, I think that's what he is concluding, and many of the experts and specialists in Agile are concluding, that we need to make sure we're clearly identifying and serving what it means to be human in order for us to have the breakthroughs that we all desire.
Prior to learning about LifeWorks systems, I was seeking out avenues to grow my emotional intelligence and ways to help others grow their emotional intelligence. And I was excited about how that's a huge part of what LifeWorks Systems does. And especially with this day and age, emotional intelligence is so vitally important to have a very collaborative, open, transparent, high-performing team.
Yes, and I appreciate that you recognize that and that you are also committed to creating that in yourself. Just for those who are listening, because I know we've covered this in other podcasts, emotional intelligence is simply being self-aware and then choosing to manage ourselves, and then being aware of what is going on in relationships with other people, and then decisively learning how to manage those relationships. And once you've achieved those competencies, it's almost like it corrects so many of the problems, because now the people systems is not a problem. It's off the table, and you can focus on other things like technology or advancements or that sort of thing. So I appreciate you understanding the relevance of emotional intelligence.
Thank you. And I will say that was kind of what made me dig into LifeWorks a little more, is that aspect of it. And then we had that conversation about sustainability, and I was like, holy smokes, this is the whole enchilada here. I need to dig into this more.
We're both stronger together than we are apart, aren't we?
Absolutely.
Because I couldn't do any of this, training and consulting and coaching on all the in-depth knowledge you have on Agile and DevOps. But because I have my own set of gifts and talents, together we can be more helpful to all kinds of different people.
And that's exciting. Yeah.
Same here.
That's real exciting.
Well, thank you so much, Don. I really, really, really appreciate you so much for doing this with me. I
really, really appreciate having the opportunity to do it. And I'm growing leaps and bounds from the cultural aspect, an area that I wanted to grow for my career. So I'm so
glad. So just like Don and I kind of can see our deep alignment, we invite you as the listeners to this podcast to join us in creating a world where all people love their lives, and where you can grow masterful in making sure that your life works today. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you for listening to LifeWorks Today. This podcast has been brought to you by LifeWorks Systems CEO and host Judy Ryan. The intent of this podcast is to provide you with hope and new ideas for greater joy in your life and work. For more information on our organization and earlier podcast episodes, related articles, videos, and more, please visit our website at lifeworksystems.com. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast and mailing list. We invite you to join us in creating a world in which all people love their lives and where your life works today.